The grain truck sat at the edge of the east field like a tombstone. A single work light burned in the cab, casting a weak yellow glow across the frostline where the winter wheat had failed. The box was theirs, a plywood wall divided in half, tarpaper on the roof, a propane heater that Norma lit with a kitchen match every night at 6. Roy sat on the passenger side with his knees pressed against the dashboard, the brass grain test kit open on his lap. The kit had been with him since 1970. He had used it to measure moisture in wheat, oats, barley, everything that had ever grown on this land. The brass was worn smooth where his thumb had pressed for 54 years. He held it the way other men held rosaries. Norma sat beside him, her county clerk's stamp in her coat pocket. The stamp had her initials, N.R.C, Norma Rose Colby. They had given it to her at retirement in 2008, mounted in a walnut base. She carried it everywhere. It was the only thing she still owned that proved she had once mattered in a building with fluorescent lights and filing cabinets and other people who called her by her name. The children had taken the farmhouse in June. There were 3 of them. Denise, 47, a real estate agent in Cedar Rapids. Mark, 44, a regional manager for a seed company. And Brian, 39, who had never left and never would. They had come on a Tuesday in October, that much was true, and they had sat at the kitchen table where Roy and Norma had eaten every meal for 42 years, and they had explained that the farm was no longer viable. The debt was too high. The equipment was too old. The land was worth more as 4 parcels than as 1. Denise had done most of the talking. She wore a Patagonia vest over a checked shirt. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob that cost $200 every 6 weeks. She had driven a black Ford Expedition with leather seats and a sunroof. She had parked it in the same spot where Roy used to park the 1972 International Harvester combine he had bought new for $18,000. "Dad," she had said, "you can't keep doing this to yourself." Roy had said nothing. "We're not taking anything from you," Mark had added. He had a spreadsheet printed on white paper. He slid it across the table. "We're reorganizing. The farmhouse needs to go into an LLC. You and Mom will have lifetime residency." Norma had looked at the spreadsheet. She had spent 32 years in the county clerk's office. She knew what words on paper meant. Lifetime residency meant nothing. It meant you could stay until they decided you couldn't. "Where will we go?" she had asked. "The East Field," Brian had said. He was the quiet one. He said it without looking up. Roy had raised his head at that. "The East Field," Brian repeated. "There's a strip along the tree line that's not tillable. We'll put a trailer there." "A trailer," Roy had whispered. "It's the only option, Dad. The bank won't let us refinance unless we consolidate the parcels. The East Field is a liability. It's not even zoned right." Norma had looked at Roy then. She had seen something leave his eyes, something that had been there since 1958, when he bought the first 20 acres with a handshake and a loan from his father. It didn't go quietly. It went the way light goes in October, gradual and then gone. So they moved. The children hired a man named Dale to haul a used mobile home onto the East Field. Dale charged $800. Denise paid him with a credit card. The mobile home was a 1988 Fleetwood that smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. The furnace didn't work. The water heater had rusted through. Roy looked at it for a long time and then walked to the grain truck and opened the driver's door and sat there until dark. Norma brought him coffee in a thermos. She sat on the passenger side. The dashboard clock read 2:14 a.m. when she finally said, "We're still here." Roy didn't answer. "We're still on the land," she said. "That counts for something." He opened the brass grain test kit and stared at the moisture meter, the sample cups, the calibration chart that he had memorized 30 years ago. He closed it again. The next morning, Norma walked to the county road and stood at the edge of the asphalt. She was 71 years old. Her hips hurt. Her fingers were swollen with arthritis. The cold bit through her coat. She looked back at the grain truck, at the plywood box, at her husband sitting in the cab with his brass kit open on his lap. But she kept walking. The county office building was 12 miles away. She had no car. The children had taken the keys to the Ford pickup, the 1994 F-150 that Roy had kept running with baling wire and prayer. Denise had said it would be sold at auction. Mark had said the insurance was too expensive. Brian had said nothing, which was worse. Norma walked 2 miles before a farm truck stopped. A man named Jerry, 72, who had known Roy since high school. He drove her to the county building and said, "You need anything else, Norma, you call." She thanked him. She got out. She stood in front of the limestone building where she had worked for 3 decades. The lobby smelled the same. Floor wax and paper and the faint chemical tang of carbon copies. The woman at the front desk was 40 years old and had never seen Norma before. She asked for identification. Norma showed her the stamp. The woman didn't understand. Norma said, "I used to work here. I needed to see the tax abatement files from 1987. The woman said, "Those are in storage." Norma said, "I know where they are." She walked past the counter. The woman called after her. Norma kept walking. She knew every door, every hallway, every room. She had filed the abatement herself in 1987. She remembered it because the form had been incomplete. The property description had been wrong. The east field had been listed under the wrong parcel number. She had set it aside to correct, and then the county fair had started, and then her mother had fallen and broken her hip, and then the stack of papers had grown and grown until the abatement was buried under 3 years of other work. She had meant to fix it. She had meant to fix it every day for 37 years. The storage room was a basement. Fluorescent lights buzzed. The metal filing cabinets were the same green ones from 1983. Norma walked to the 4th row, 3rd cabinet, 2nd drawer. She pulled it open. The file was there. She lifted it out. The paper was yellow, the corners were brittle. She opened it and read the property description: 80 acres, section 12, township 84, range 6, east field. The parcel number was wrong. It had always been wrong. The east field had never been part of the main farm's legal description. It had been surveyed separately in 1947, when Roy's father bought it from a widow named Hargrove. The deed had never been properly consolidated. The tax rolls had listed it under a different parcel number for 77 years. Norma stood in the fluorescent light and read the file 3 times. The abatement, if finalized, would release a tax lien that had been on the east field since 1987. The lien was the reason the east field couldn't be sold or refinanced. The children had tried to include it in the LLC, but the title company had flagged the lien and said it would take months to clear. The children had moved on. They had left the east field alone because it was a problem they didn't want to solve. But Norma had the file. She had the stamp. She knew exactly which form to use, which box to check, which signature to obtain. She knew the current county clerk, a man named Peterson who had been her deputy for 6 years before she retired. He owed her. He owed her for every late night, every filing error she had fixed without credit, every time she had covered for him when his wife was sick. She carried the file upstairs. Peterson was in his office. He looked up when she walked in. He was 58 years old, soft around the middle, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He said, "Norma?" She set the file on his desk. "I need you to process this." He opened it. He read. His face changed. He said, "This is the east field at Colby Farms." "Yes. This abatement was never finalized." "I know." He looked at her. He looked at her coat, her hands, her face. He knew where she was living. Everyone in town knew. News traveled faster in a county of 9,000 people than any fiber optic cable ever could. "Norma," he said, "if I process this, the lien releases. The east field becomes a separate parcel, clear title, owned free and clear. Your children can't touch it." "I know." He leaned back in his chair. The springs creaked. He looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he looked at her again. "Why didn't you fix this in 1987? She didn't answer. "The form was incomplete," he said. "That's what the file says. You set it aside and never came back." She still didn't answer. 37 years, he said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the stamp. She set it on the desk beside the file. The walnut base clicked against the wood. "I'm fixing it now," she said. Peterson looked at the stamp. N.R.C. He had seen it 1,000 times. He had watched her use it on 1,000 documents. He had watched her correct 1,000 errors that other people had made. He picked up his pen. "I need you to sign the correction form," he said. "Then I need you to stamp it. Then I need you to walk out of this building and never mention this to anyone until you're ready." Norma picked up the pen. Her hand shook. Arthritis. Cold. The years. She signed her name. She picked up the stamp. She pressed it into the ink pad and then onto the paper. The impression was clean. Perfect. The same way she had done it for 32 years. She set the stamp down. "Thank you, Harold," she said. Peterson nodded. He took the file and locked it in his desk drawer. Norma walked out of the building and stood on the steps. The wind was cold. The sky was white with November clouds. She looked east toward the grain truck, toward the plywood box, toward her husband with his brass kit. She started walking. It took her 3 hours to get back. Jerry wasn't on the road. She walked the shoulder, past the same farm she had driven past 1,000 times. She knew every field. She knew who had planted what, who had failed, who had sold out to the conglomerates. She passed the Stoltzfus farm, the Larson place, the old Miller homestead that was now a solar farm. She reached the east field at dusk. Roy was still in the cab. The work light was on. He had the brass kit open. He looked up when she opened the door. His eyes asked the question his mouth wouldn't. She climbed in and sat beside him. "The East Field is ours," she said. "Not theirs." "Ours." He stared at her. "I fixed the abatement," she said. "It was never finalized. There was a processing error. I filed it in 1987 and never closed it. The lien was blocking the title. It's gone now. The field is separate. It's never been part of the main farm's legal description. It's ours." Roy looked at the grain test kit. He touched the brass. He picked up the moisture meter and held it to the light. 80 acres, she said. He didn't speak for a long time. The dashboard clock ticked. Propane heater hissed. The wind moved through the dead corn stalks in the field beyond. 80 acres, he finally said. Not a question, a repetition, a word he was trying to fit into the shape of his understanding. She took his hand. His fingers were cold. The arthritis in her knuckles screamed. She held on anyway. "We can build something," she said. "A house," he said. "Maybe. A garden? Maybe." He closed his eyes. He was still holding the moisture meter. She watched his thumb move across the brass, back and forth. The same motion he had made for 54 years. "I never thought I'd own anything again," he said. She squeezed his hand. The window of the grain truck faced east. The sky was dark now. The stars were coming out. Norma watched them and thought about the file, the drawer, the stamp. She thought about Peterson locking it in his desk. She thought about the children, about Denise with her spreadsheet and Mark with his seed company and Brian with his silence. They didn't know yet. They were in the farmhouse 40 acres away. They were eating dinner in the kitchen she had cooked in for 42 years. They were sitting at the table where she had set the Thanksgiving turkey, where she had helped Roy with his bills, where she had watched her grandchildren color on paper placemats. They didn't know that the East Field was gone. She thought about telling them. She thought about the look on Denise's face. She thought about the silence that would follow. But she didn't say anything. She sat in the grain truck with her husband and her stamp and the brass test kit, and she waited. The propane heater clicked off. The temperature dropped. Roy pulled the blanket over both of them. It was thin. It smelled of diesel and dust. She didn't care. "Tomorrow," she said, "we walk to the title office. And then we file the deed. And then," she looked at the brass kit, at the worn thumbprint, at the man who had measured 1,000 harvests with it. "And then we figure out what 80 acres can hold." Roy nodded. He closed the brass kit and set it on the dashboard in front of him. It caught the light from the work lamp. The brass glowed. They sat in the dark. The wind came through the cracks in the door seal. She felt it on her neck. She pulled the blanket tighter. She was 71 years old. She was living in a grain truck. Her children had taken everything but the land under her feet. But she had the file. She had the stamp. She had the East Field. And she had not yet told Roy the rest. The part about the mineral rights. The part about the 1947 deed that gave the owner of the East Field a perpetual easement across the main farm to the county road. The part about the well that had been capped in 1952, but was still on the books. The part about the timber stand that had been logged once and never replanted. She had not told him that the East Field was not just land, it was a key. She looked at him. He was asleep. His hand was still on the brass kit. She watched his chest rise and fall. The wind moaned across the field. The grain truck creaked. She reached into her pocket and touched the stamp. Tomorrow, she thought. But tonight she let him sleep. She let him sleep. The morning came gray and wet. A low cloud had settled over the East Field, and the grass was slick with dew that beaded on the leaves like sweat. Norma woke first. Her neck was stiff. Her hip ached. The blanket had slipped off sometime in the night, and she had curled into Roy's side without meaning to, her cheek against the wool of his coat. She lay still for a moment, listening. The rain had stopped. The world was quiet. She sat up carefully. Roy did not stir. His hand was still on the brass kit, his fingers curled around it the way a child holds a toy in sleep. She looked at his face. He looked older in the morning light. The lines were deeper. The skin was thinner. But his breathing was steady, and the color in his cheeks was better than it had been the night before. She climbed over him and opened the passenger door. The cold hit her like a wall. She stepped down onto the wet grass. Her boots sank an inch into the mud. The farmhouse was visible from here, a dark shape against the gray sky. The lights were on in the kitchen. She could see a figure moving behind the window. Denise, probably, making coffee, checking her phone, wondering where they were. Norma did not go toward the house. She walked to the back of the grain truck and pulled the tarp off the toolbox. She had packed light, but she had packed smart. A change of clothes, a bar of soap, a towel, a small bag of coffee grounds she had taken from the kitchen before Denise had changed the locks. She built a fire in the steel drum they had found behind the truck. It was still wet from the rain, but she had dry newspaper in her bag, and she had a lighter. It took 3 tries. The flames caught on the 4th. She set the camp stove on the drum and boiled water. By the time Roy woke, she had coffee ready. He climbed down stiffly, his knees cracking, his back bent. He took the enamel mug from her hands without a word. He stood by the fire and drank it black. The steam curled around his face. "I dreamed about the well," he said. "Which well?" "The one in the east field. The capped one." She looked at him. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he said. "I just don't always say it." They stood by the fire and drank their coffee and watched the farmhouse. The lights were on. The curtains were open. She could see Brian standing at the kitchen window, his phone to his ear. "He's calling Mark," Norma said. "Let him. They're going to figure out we're not in the house." "They already know," Roy said. "Denise came out here at 3 in the morning. I saw her." She walked to the edge of the yard and stood there. She didn't come any closer. Norma said nothing. She finished her coffee and rinsed the mug with water from the jug. She packed the camp stove and the tarp and the rest of the coffee grounds. She put the brass kit in her coat pocket. "We need to walk," she said. "To the title office." To the county recorder. "The title office is closed on Saturdays." Roy nodded. He put his mug in the toolbox and closed the lid. He buttoned his coat and pulled his cap down low. He looked at the farmhouse one more time. "I don't think they're going to let us walk," he said. "Then we walk fast." They made it half a mile before the truck caught up with them. It was Mark's truck, the white Ford with the seed company decal on the door. He pulled up alongside them on the gravel road. The window rolled down, his face was red, his jaw was tight. "Get in," Norma said. "Mom, get in the truck. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about." Mark slammed his hand on the steering wheel. The sound echoed across the empty fields. "You can't just leave. You can't just disappear. Dad talked to her." Roy stopped walking. He turned and looked at his son. The wind was blowing from the east, and the gray light caught the lines on his face. He looked old and tired and very still. "We're not disappearing," he said. "We're walking." "Where?" "To the county office. I already called them. The file you have, it's a copy." "It doesn't mean anything. It's a copy of the original," Norma said, "and I have the stamp." Mark's face went pale. "You don't have the stamp." "I have it. I have it." "You can't use it. That stamp was retired. It's not valid." "The county said it's still on file. I checked. The 1947 deed used that stamp. The current system recognizes it." Mark stared at her. His hands were white on the wheel. "You checked." "I checked? 2 years ago, after you told Roy he couldn't farm anymore." The silence stretched. The truck idled. The exhaust pipe rattled. Mark looked at his father, then back at his mother. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You've been planning this," he said. "No," Norma said. "I've been waiting." Mark got out of the truck. He stood in the road. He was taller than his father now, broader in the shoulders. But there was something soft about him, something that had never been hardened by the work. He looked at them across the hood of the Ford. "Give me the file," he said. "No." "Mom, give me the file. We can work this out. We can." "There's nothing to work out. The bank is calling Mom. Every day. They want their money. If you file that deed, they're going to take the whole farm, the house, the equipment, everything. That's not my problem. It is your problem. You signed the papers. I signed them under duress. And I have witnesses." Mark's face went white. "What witnesses?" "Annette from the nursing home. The physical therapist who was there when you made Roy sign. She saw you. She told me." "That's not." "And the banker, the one who processed the loan. He was your roommate in college. He told me everything." Mark took a step back. His hand went to his pocket, then stopped. He looked at Roy. "Dad, did you know about this?" Roy looked at his son. He looked at him for a long time. The wind blew. The grass bent. "I know everything," Roy said. "I just didn't always say it." Mark got back in the truck. He didn't say anything else. He put it in gear and drove away, the tires spitting gravel. Norma watched the truck disappear over the rise. She waited until the dust settled, then she started walking again. The county recorder's office was in a building that had once been a bank. The floors were marble. The ceilings were high. The woman behind the counter was young, maybe 30, with glasses on a chain and a nameplate that said M. Kowalski. Norma put the file on the counter. "I need to file this deed," she said. M. Kowalski looked at the file. She opened it. She read. Her face changed. She looked up. "Is this the 1947 Eastfield deed?" "Yes." The woman looked at Roy. She looked at Norma. She looked back at the file. "This is a copy. The original is in the county vault. I need you to verify it." "I can't do that without—" "Call Peterson. He knows." The woman hesitated. Then she picked up the phone and dialed. She spoke quietly. She listened. She hung up. "Mr. Peterson is on his way." "Good." The woman looked at them. "You can wait over there." They sat on a wooden bench by the window. The sun was coming out now, thin and pale through the clouds. Norma watched the parking lot. She saw Peterson's car pull in. She saw him get out. He was carrying a folder. He walked slowly, like a man carrying something heavy. He came through the doors and walked to the counter. He didn't look at them. He spoke to M. Kowalski. She nodded. She disappeared into the back. When she came back, she had the original file. Peterson opened it. He compared the documents. He looked at the stamp. He looked at the signatures. He looked at the map. "It's valid," he said. Norma felt the air leave her lungs. "File it," she said. Peterson looked at her. "You understand what this means?" "File it." He took the stamp. He pressed it to the deed. The sound was soft, a thump and a click, the sound of a door closing. "Filed," he said. The news traveled fast. By the time they walked back to the grain truck, Denise was waiting for them. She was standing by the driver's door. Her arms were crossed. Her face was hard. "You filed it," she says. "Yes, you just gave away the farm. I gave away nothing. I took back what was mine." Denise's face twisted. "You think this is a victory? You think you won? Mom, the bank is going to foreclose on the rest. We're going to lose everything. You should have thought of that before you took my house." Denise stared at her. "You're not my mother." "Yes, I am. I'm just not your doormat." Denise turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She got in her car and drove off, the tires spraying mud. Norma watched her go. She felt nothing. The next 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Peterson helped. He knew the system. He knew the loopholes. He knew the judges. By the end of the third day, the deed was recorded. The east field was Norma's. The rest of the farm was not. The bank called. They wanted their money. Norma told them to talk to Mark. The bank called Mark. Mark called Norma. She didn't answer. The children came the grain truck, one by one. First Brian, who stood in the rain and said nothing. Then Denise, who tried to yell. Then Mark, who tried to cry. Norma watched them from the truck. She didn't open the door. On the fourth day, the sheriff came. He was young. He had a kind face. He stood by the grain truck and knocked on the window. Norma rolled it down. "Ma'am, I have a court order. I need you to vacate this property. This property is the east field." "I own the east field. The truck is on the main farm." Norma looked at the ground. The truck was parked on the edge of the east field, but the wheels were on the main farm. She had not noticed. She had been careless. "I'll move it," she said. "You have 24 hours. She moved it. She drove the grain truck into the east field, across the furrows, past the dead corn, to the place where the well was capped. She parked it next to the oak tree. She got out. She looked at the field. It was hers. On the fifth day, Peterson came to the east field. He drove his old sedan across the dirt road and parked next to the grain truck. He got out. He was carrying a box. He set it on the tailgate. "I brought you some things," he said. "What things?" "Records. Copies of the original surveys. The mineral rights documentation, the easement." Norma looked at him. "Why?" "Because you're going to need them." She opened the box. It was full of papers, old papers, yellowed papers, papers that smelled of dust and time. She picked up the top one. It was a map hand-drawn, dated 1947. The east field was circled in red. A note in the margin said, "Mineral rights reserved. Perpetual easement granted." Well, cap 1952, she looked at Peterson. "There's oil under this field," she said. "There might be. Or water. But yes." She put the map down. She looked at the field. The dead corn, the capped well, the old oak tree. "Mark didn't know," she said. "No, he didn't. Because you didn't tell him." Peterson looked at her. "I work for the county, Norma. I don't work for your children. And I don't work for the bank. I work for the land." She nodded. She understood. On the sixth day, Roy woke up with a cough. It was a wet cough, deep in his chest. He tried to hide it, but Norma heard. She made him sit up. She made him drink water. She felt his forehead. He was warm. "I'm fine," he said. "You're not fine." "I'm fine." She made him lie down. She covered him with the blanket. She built a fire and boiled water and made tea. He drank it. He coughed again. His face was gray. "We need to see a doctor," she said. "No, Ro." She didn't argue. She sat beside him. She held his hand. He closed his eyes. His breath was shallow. His chest rattled. "I'm not dying," he said. "I know. No, not yet." "I know." He opened his eyes. He looked at her. "I want to see the well. Now." She helped him up. He leaned on her. They walked across the field slowly, step by step. The grass was wet. The mud was thick. The well was a concrete cap set into the ground, covered with moss and weeds. He knelt beside it. He put his hand on the concrete. "This is where my father capped it," he said. "I know." He said there was nothing down there. "And you believed him?" Roy looked at the well. "I believed everything he said." He stayed there for a long time, his hand on the concrete, his eyes closed. The wind blew. The clouds moved. Norma stood beside him and said nothing. Finally, he stood up. He was shaking. His knees were weak. She caught him. "Let's go back," she said. In a minute, he looked at the field, the dead corn, the oak tree, the grain truck, the sky. "This is it," he said. "This is all we have. It's enough." He looked at her. His eyes were wet. "Is this?" He nodded. He let her lead him back to the truck. He lay down on the mattress. She covered him. He fell asleep with his hand on the brass kit, his thumb moving back and forth in his sleep, the same motion he had made for 54 years. On the 7th day, Mark came back. He walked across the field alone. He didn't bring the truck. He didn't bring Denise or Brian. He came on foot, his hands in his pockets, his head down. He stopped at the edge of the east field. He stood there. Norma watched him from the grain truck. She did not get out. He stood for a long time. The wind blew. The clouds moved. Finally, he sat down in the grass. He sat there for an hour, 2 hours. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows changed. Norma got out of the truck. She walked to where he was sitting. She stood beside him. "What do you want?" she said. "I don't know." She waited. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "I thought I was saving the farm." "You were saving yourself." He looked at her. His face was broken. "Maybe. The bank is going to foreclose. I know. Denise is going to lose her job. I know. Brian is going to move away. I know." He looked at the field, the dead corn, the capped well, the grain truck. "I didn't know about the mineral rights," he said. "I know. If I had known, you would have taken them anyway." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Norma sat down beside him. She was tired. She was 71 years old. She was living in a grain truck. Her children had taken everything but the land under her feet. She sat in the grass next to her son and looked at the field. "I'm not going to drill for oil," she said. "What? I'm not going to drill. I'm not going to sell the mineral rights. I'm going to let the well stay capped." Mark looked at her. "Why?" "Because it's not about the oil. It's about the land. It's about the fact that I own something that no one can take from me." He stared at her. "Then what are you going to do?" She looked at the field, the dead corn, the old oak tree, the grain truck. "I'm going to plant a garden," she said. On the 8th day, Peterson came back. He brought a box of seeds. He brought a shovel. He brought a pair of work gloves. He set them on the tailgate of the grain truck. "These are for you," he said. Norma looked at the seeds. Tomatoes, beans, squash, zucchini, herbs, flowers. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. Just plant them." She did. She spent the day in the field, turning the soil, pulling the weeds, planting the seeds. The sun was warm. The earth was soft. She worked until her back ached and her hands were blistered. She worked until the sun went down. When she was done, she stood in the middle of the field and looked at what she had made. It was small. It was messy. It was not much, but it was hers. On the 9th day, Roy woke up and said, "I want to see the garden." She helped him out of the truck. He was weak. His chest was still rattling. But he stood. He walked. He leaned on her. They walked to the garden. The seeds were not yet sprouting. The soil was dark and wet. The rows were straight. He looked at it for a long time. "It's not much," she said. "It's enough." He knelt down. He put his hand in the soil. He let it run through his fingers. He closed his eyes. "I can feel it," he said. "Feel what?" "The life." She knelt beside him. She put her hand in the soil. It was cold. It was wet. It was alive. They stayed there for a long time. On the 10th day, Denise came. She did not come to fight. She came to say goodbye. She stood at the edge of the east field with a suitcase in her hand. "I'm leaving," she said. "I know. I'm going to stay with a friend in Chicago." "Good." Denise looked at her mother. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry. I know. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did." Denise nodded. She wiped her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "No," Norma said. "I don't think I will." Denise turned and walked away. She didn't look back. Norma watched her go. She felt nothing, and then she felt everything, and then she felt nothing again. On the 11th day, Mark came back. He did not come to fight. He came to apologize. He stood at the edge of the east field with a piece of paper in his hand. "This is the deed to the main farm," he said. The bank gave it back. I don't know why. Norma took the paper. She looked at it. It was a quitclaim deed. It transferred ownership of the main farm to her and Roy. "Why?" she said. "Peterson. He found something. A recording error from 1982. The bank's lien was invalid. They had to give it back." Norma looked at the deed. She looked at the field. She looked at her son. "Take it," she said. "What? Take the deed?" "It's yours. It was always going to be yours." Mark stared at her. "I don't understand. I don't need the farm. I have the east field. I have the garden. I have Roy. That's all I need. But take it." He took it. He held it in his hands. He looked at it. He looked at her. His face was wet. "I don't deserve this," he said. No, she said. You don't, but that's not the point. On the 12th day, Roy died. He died in his sleep in the grain truck with his hand on the brass kit. Norma woke up and found him cold. She sat beside him for a long time. She held his hand. She watched the sun rise. She did not cry. She got out of the truck. She walked to the garden. The seeds had sprouted. Green shoots were pushing through the dark soil. She knelt down and touched them. Then she went back to the truck and called Peterson. The funeral was small. Norma did not want a big service. She wanted a grave in the east field under the oak tree. The county said no. She fought them. Roy was buried in the east field in the shade of the old oak tree. Peterson gave the eulogy. He spoke about the land. He spoke about the work. He spoke about the man who had measured 1,000 harvests with a brass test kit. Norma stood at the grave and listened. She did not cry. When it was over, she went back to the grain truck. She sat on the tailgate. She looked at the field. The garden was growing. The corn was dead. The well was capped. She opened the brass kit. It was empty. Roy had taken the last measurement with him. She closed it. She put it in her lap. She sat there until the sun went down. On the 13th day, a letter came. It was in an envelope with no return address. The handwriting was Denise's. Norma opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't say it to your face. I was wrong. I know that now. I hope you find peace. I hope you know I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. Denise. Norma read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket. She did not respond. On the 14th day, the garden bloomed. The tomatoes were red. The peppers were green. The beans were climbing the stakes. The squash was yellow. The cucumbers were fat. The herbs were fragrant. Norma walked through the garden. She touched the leaves. She smelled the flowers. She picked a tomato and ate it standing in the field. The juice ran down her chin. She was 71 years old. She was living in a grain truck. She had buried her husband under an oak tree. Her children were gone. The farm was saved. She looked at the garden. It was small. It was messy. It was not much, but it was hers. She went back to the grain truck. She sat on the tailgate. She opened the brass kit. It was still empty. She held it in her hands. She ran her thumb across the brass, back and forth, the same motion he had made for 54 years. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink. The fields were quiet. The wind was warm. She closed the brass kit. She set it on the dashboard. She looked at the garden, at the oak tree, at the capped well, at the sky. She thought about the file, the stamp, the deed, the mineral rights, the easement, the well, the seeds, the soil, the life. She thought about Roy. His hand on the brass kit, his thumb moving across the brass, his voice saying, I never thought I'd own anything again. She thought about the children, Denise with her spreadsheet, Mark with his seed company, Brian with his silence. She thought about the farmhouse. The kitchen, the Thanksgiving turkey, the grandchildren. She thought about the east field. She sat in the grain truck and watched the sun go down. The stars came out. The wind blew. The garden grew. She was 71 years old. She was not done yet. The next morning she woke to the sound of rain. She lay in the grain truck and listened to it drum on the roof. The sound was good. The sound was clean. The sound was life. She got up. She made coffee. She stood by the fire and watched the rain fall on the garden. The leaves were wet. The soil was dark. The world was green. She finished her coffee. She rinsed the mug. She put on her coat. She walked to the garden. She knelt down. She put her hands in the soil. It was cold. It was wet. It was alive. She worked all day in the rain. She pulled the weeds. She staked the tomatoes. She tied the beans. She picked the zucchini. She talked to the plants. She talked to Roy. She talked to herself. When she was done, she stood in the middle of the garden. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. The light was golden. She looked at the garden. It was not much. It was 80 acres of dead corn and capped wells and stolen deeds and broken promises. But in the middle of it all, there was a garden. And in the garden, there was life. She went back to the grain truck. She sat on the tailgate. She opened the brass kit. It was still empty. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the letter from Denise. She read it one more time. Then she folded it and put it in the brass kit. She closed the lid. She set it on the dashboard. She looked at the garden. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink. The fields were quiet. The wind was warm. She thought about the file, the deed, the mineral rights, the easement, the well, the seeds, the soil, the life. She thought about Roy. She thought about the children. She thought about the farm. She thought about the garden. She sat in the grain truck and watched the sun go down. The stars came out. The wind blew. The garden grew. She was 71 years old. She was not done yet. The next morning she walked to the oak tree. She stood at Roy's grave. The grass had grown over it. The soil had settled. She knelt down and put her hand on the ground. I planted the tomatoes, she said. They're doing well. She waited. The squash is coming in. The beans are climbing. I think I planted too many. She waited. I miss you. She waited. The wind blew. The leaves rustled. The garden rustled. She stood up. She looked at the field, the dead corn, the capped well, the grain truck, the garden. This is it, she said. This is all we have. She waited. It's enough. She turned and walked back to the truck. She lived in the grain truck for the rest of the summer. She worked the garden. She picked the vegetables. She canned the tomatoes. She dried the herbs. She stored the squash. She ate the beans. She talked to Roy. She talked to the plants. She talked to the wind. She did not hear from the children. She did not call them. She was alone. She was not lonely. On the first day of autumn, she walked to the edge of the east field. The corn was gone. The garden was dying. The leaves were turning. The air was cold. She looked at the field. She looked at the truck. She looked at the oak tree. She looked at the sky. She thought about the file, the stamp, the deed, the mineral rights, the easement, the well, the seeds, the soil, the life. About Roy. She thought about the children. She thought about the farm. She thought about the garden. She thought about everything she had lost and everything she had kept. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the brass test kit. It was not empty anymore. Inside, she had put a seed, a single bean seed, dried and brown. She held it in her hand. She looked at it. She walked to the garden. She knelt down. She put the seed in the soil. She covered it. She stood up. She looked at the field. The wind blew. She walked back to the grain truck. She sat on the tailgate. She waited.